So, so here's an overview of what I'm going to cover. I think it's about maybe 40 minutes, depending if there's questions. I have 32 slides and 20 pictures.
Perfect.
So, you probably know most of the Who Am I stuff already. But I was going to go over what cars I've owned in my driving career. So my first car was a 1975 Mercury Bobcat, which is very similar to it's just a rebranding of the Ford Pinto, which was fairly famous because of the exploding gas tank. But that was kind of a cool car in that it was also sort of Detroit's answer to the oil crisis of the 70s. That was the first small car, compact car made by Ford, I believe, in the North American market. And I also owned a 75 Oldsmobile Cutlass, which is, although the same year, coming from the same era, was almost the exact opposite in terms of the engine size is twice as big and probably the mass is twice the size. I had a 1980 Corolla when I was in university as well, which was a really good car, and at the time was probably one of the smallest cars available in the North American market. And then just recently I replaced a 99 Cavalier with a 2007 Prius, which I'm working on converting to be a plug-in Prius so that I can recharge it from a solar electric array. As I mentioned, my name is Brent Vietch and I'm a co-owner of Rock Paper Sun. We do solar installs. We don't do car conversions or have any formal or professional alliance with them. Yet. So I want to talk first about fossil fuels. I have a slide on electricity and a slide on oil. So in SaskPower, I have some stats that I got off their webpage here, but the main thing I took from it was that 44% of our energy comes from coal and about 30% from natural gas. I think they're keeping the coal production about the same and ramping up the natural gas to meet our increasing demand in the province. SaskPower also had a green power program, or they do have a green power program, but it's fully subscribed. So the way green power works is you can pay an extra 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour, and they give you power that's supposedly green or coming from the wind farms in the south part of the province. But that's fully subscribed, which tells me that the demand for that program is outpacing the supply, which you might argue is meaning that the 2.5 cents is too low. If they raise the price, then maybe the demand would equalize.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Oh yeah.
So what's considered green? Is hydro green or just wind and other?
I think it all comes from the wind in that green program. And it's some sort of eco-certified wind. Somebody told me that the Crown corporations have purchased up all of that power. So it's not, that's why as homeowners we can't get it anymore. I have one block, you buy it in blocks of 100 kilowatts hours a month. So I'm buying one block on my power bill every month, but I can't get more. One thing that on SaskPower they have a comparison of the different types of energy, including what they call green energy or new renewable energies. And one thing that I'm disappointed with is they have pros and cons of each energy source. And for coal, they don't talk about any of the pollutants produced by coal. So if you Google concerns over coal, one thing you'll find is mercury contribution to the environment. I found on the web that coal is the largest contributor of mercury to the environment in North America. And that's not something that SaskPower will mention, or seems to mention on their webpage.
Is that all types of coal?
In general, yeah. I don't know specifically. And I don't have references for almost any of my data I have here. And then the other numbers I have are the greenhouse gas production related to coal and natural gas. I think the official number that SaskPower uses for their mix, the total mix we get, is something like 0.7.
0.762 they said last week.
So that was where electricity comes from, and as bad as that is, a lot of people consider using oil or the production, securing, and transportation of oil is a bigger problem than electricity. Most of our automobiles run on oil-based fuel, and I have some efficiencies of the different engines, and you can see that one advantage to the electrical production in the province is the facilities are quite large and they have the ability to increase the efficiencies of production. Then they have losses in distribution. On the previous slide I had it about 10%. I've heard it's as high as 100%. That is, I've heard it's as high as it takes twice as much energy. It takes 200 watts to deliver 100 watts to your house. So most gasoline engines in North America use the Otto cycle, which is maybe about 20% efficient. One thing that's happened with the new hybrid vehicles is they're able to use a different cycle in their gasoline engines, which has a higher efficiency. And diesel cycles also are higher efficiency yet, up in the 40% range. So what are the alternatives to this dirty electricity and dirty oil? So for electricity, the alternatives are typically thought of as wind, hydro, cogeneration, and also biofuels and solar. But from a personal point of view, if you don't want to buy your electricity from a third party, then most people in the province are going with either solar or wind. And if you're inside of a city, then solar PV is pretty well your only option, which is what's on this house here. For transportation fuels, by far the best way to reduce your dependence on oil is to reduce the number and length of trips that you're taking. Walking or biking, which Ron did today to get here, which is excellent. Using public transportation or carpooling, which effectively reduces the number of fueled trips that are being taken. Using more efficient vehicles, and using clean electricity in plug-in electric or plug-in hybrid vehicles. Am I missing any? One thing I guess is some people are talking about now too is living in more dense areas, so it reduces the length of trips that you require based on living close to your work. So electric vehicles have been around a long time. I'm going to talk about the history of them next, but something has happened to profoundly change the electric vehicle availability within the last few years. And so these next couple slides, I'm talking about what I think are some of the motivators for change, why we're seeing so many electric vehicles. And the first one is the public and government possibly understanding of climate change and the impact that the vehicle is having on climate change. There's an extreme desire to reduce tailpipe emissions. Now some of this comes from what you might call local climate change, or the smog production in California, and that's sort of spilt over into the other markets. Something else that's happened is the increased energy costs. These costs are both financial and geosocial or political, related to global conflicts, and as well as disruption of habitat in order to mine and transport our resources. The high energy costs, especially in Europe and Japan, have really encouraged the automakers in those jurisdictions or areas to be a lot more efficient with the automobiles, downsizing their automobiles and coming up with much more efficient versions. A lot of that has spilt over into our market. Something else that's happened, possibly as a result of the electronic devices, wireless laptops and cell phones, is the lithium-ion battery technology has drastically changed in the last few years. So a lot of almost all the new electric cars are using some sort of lithium-ion based rechargeable battery, which is what I have here. This battery is about twice as energy dense as a more traditional lead acid battery. And the pricing is about the same. Something else that spurred the electric vehicles is some what you might consider failed California legislation to have I don't remember the percentage, but a certain number of vehicles by the year 2000 were to be zero emission. And that a lot of these items are talked about in the film Who Killed the Electric Car. Recently, the economic crisis in the United States and Eastern Canada or Central Canada has caused a number of the automakers to have serious trouble. And so that's caused them to rethink what they're doing, and there was a lot of pressure by governments and population to say, if we're going to bail you out, you're going to change what you're doing. Can't keep doing the same. The great success of the Toyota Prius really as a partially electric car. So it's a pure hybrid. All its energy comes from gasoline, but people see the ability of the electric portion of the vehicle, and there's a large demand to have plug-in versions of that car and other cars like it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of electric cars, and it turns out that both electric cars and gasoline cars share a lot of history. When the automobiles were first being developed, neither technology really dominated. There were a lot of problems getting gasoline engines or diesel engines to work well, to be quiet, to be efficient, to be clean, whereas electric cars were a lot quieter and cleaner, but there were problems with the battery technology. So both vehicles for consumer use were fairly commonly used around the 1900s. So in Saskatchewan, around the 1900s, and then World War I, where they needed the ability to transport vehicles